Well, it's that time of the offseason. Feel Steele, preseason All-SEC, preseason All-Americans, Tennessee. A pretty good showing in both. That and a whole lot more. It's your Monday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it, your Monday edition of Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Kane. Big shout out to our friends over at LinkedIn, where you can post your job for free and find the opportunities you want over at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We got a lot to get into here today on a Monday show. Feel Steele, preseason All-SEC, preseason All-American teams. We're going to touch base on those in segments 1 and 2. And then I'm going to give you my firsthand account of the greatest Tennessee baseball game that I've ever covered. And, of course, the most important and best game in Tennessee baseball history. Of course, that was Friday night, a College World Series walk-off comeback win over Florida State. I am in Omaha right now. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm in some type of meeting room right now. And because Tennessee played Sunday night at 6 o'clock, 7 Eastern, you guys know the drill. I'm going to be there till well after midnight, and I won't have time to record and give you an update on what happened on last night's show or on last night's game. But, of course, I'll hit on that on Tuesday's show. So going to talk all about Tennessee and Florida State, that historic win. And we'll get into your questions for the mailbag edition of the show. That is tomorrow's show, Tuesday, by sending in those questions on the YouTube channel and, of course, at _Kaner and at Locked On Vols. Okay, so Tennessee well represented in Feel Steele's All-SEC preseason team. It's that time of the offseason where we're doing list season, we're doing this and that. But, one list, one ranking system that comes out every single offseason that catches every football fan's eyes every single year is the one from Feel Steele and his magazine. The Feel Steele magazine does awesome in-depth look at every single team in the country. Division I puts out its preseason teams and All-American teams. We'll get into the All-Americans in segment number 2, and we'll ask if there's, should there be any more from Tennessee's side, and we'll kind of go over who else around the country in the SEC made the All-Americans. But first, the 7 volunteers that made the All-SEC preseason squad from Feel Steele. On the first team, one selection. I'll give you one guess. Ready? It's James Pearce. Good guess. Way to go, everybody. That was easy. James Pearce, Tennessee's lone representative on the first team for the preseason All-SEC for Feel Steele. On the second team, one player. That is offensive lineman Cooper Mays. On the third team, you have 2 players, wide receiver Squirrel White and defensive lineman Omar Norman Lott. On the fourth team, you have 3 players, offensive lineman Javonte Spraggins, running back Dylan Sampson, and punter Jackson Ross. You combine all those together, those are your 7 volunteers who are recognized by Feel Steele on the All-SEC team. So is there any players that were not mentioned that should have been mentioned? I mean, let's be frank here. These are 4 teams. That is a whole lot. That is a whole lot to kind of do in terms of a preseason rankings. So there's a lot of names on here that are not going to be All-SEC and postseason, of course, by the media or by the league. So is there anybody else on Tennessee's team that might have got a disservice by not being mentioned on these teams? Well, I think the first player that probably would come to mind in that situation would be probably our wide receiver and Brew McCoy. Brew McCoy, of course, is coming off an injury, a real bad injury, so we got to see how he bounces back, of course, and all indications are that he's going to bounce back and be just fine. Remember how key Brew McCoy was for Tennessee in the 2022 season when, you had Cedric Tillman in and out of the lineup. Of course, you had Jalen Hyatt, but Brew McCoy was steady Eddie over there. Out to the left, he was second on the team in receiving. He was second on the team in receptions. He was second on the team in yards. All that behind Jalen Hyatt. He was really, really solid for Tennessee in 2022 and was off to a decent start in 23 before going down with injury. But we got to see how he bounces back. And even with the one productive year he's had for Tennessee so far, it's not like it was worthy of being an All-SEC, numbers-wise. But he's kind of the first name that kind of came to my mind as like, oh, well, where's Brew McCoy? Okay, well, what about another name? Kind of work positions by positions. Nobody in the secondary, right? Because that's completely brand new. Nobody at linebacker because Keenan Peely has played 1 game here at Tennessee after coming over from transfer from BYU, but he's only played 1 game. It's a lot of newbies there at linebacker alongside him. I think if Elijah Herring was still on the team for stats alone, he would be on one of these preseason, squads, in my opinion, but he's gone to Memphis. On the defensive line, maybe Omari Thomas. Omari Thomas kind of comes to mind. There's a whole lot of hype about Bryson Eason this offseason, but, stats-wise, and that's what these are. These are all about numbers and stats. Stats-wise, it's not ever been there to kind of worthy, him to be on one of these teams. But Omari Thomas is probably one that is another one along with Brew McCoy. On the offensive side, maybe John Campbell at tackle, maybe, but I understand why he's not on there. Lance Hurd's a first-year player at Tennessee. He didn't play in starter minutes or starter snaps, I should say, at LSU, so understand why he's not on there. Nico has not been a starting quarterback for Tennessee yet outside of the bowl game, so I understand he's not on there. Overall, I think these players make a whole lot of sense. Squirrel White's been productive in this offense. Cooper Mays has been productive in this offense, as is Javonte Spraggins. Dylan Sampson, and the minimal opportunities that he's shown, he's been productive. Plus, there's 4 teams, so it kind of makes some sense that he's going to land on one of those. Omar Norman Lott, 5.5 sacks from the interior of the defensive line last year. That makes a whole lot of sense. Jackson Ross, his ability to punt with both legs, rugby-style traditional. Had a pretty decent year for Tennessee last year. In his first year, playing real college football. He redshirted the year before. He makes a whole lot of sense for being on there. And, of course, James Pearce makes the most sense of them all. So I think Tennessee is well represented. I think Tennessee fans should be pleased that, 7 Vols were recognized in terms of going into the 2024 season, that, hey, these guys can be really good, and these guys can build on, kind of what they did last year and see what happens and how good of a season might be in store for them. Who else from around the SEC comprised these teams? Well, without listing all straight down the list, we'll kind of give you some highlights. On the first team for Phil Steele offensively, it's Carson Beck at Georgia, quarterback. No surprise there. The running backs are Montrell Johnson of Florida and Jacquez Hunter of Auburn. Okay. The wide receivers are Trey Harris, Ole Miss, Luther Burden, Missouri, Kyron Lacey at LSU. Some of the notable offensive linemen, Tyler Booker of Georgia, Will Campbell, the offensive tackle at LSU, one of the reasons why Lance Hurd transferred. Second team SEC on offense. Jalen Milroe, your quarterback. Dylan Bell, the wide receiver that really hurt Tennessee whenever Georgia came to Neyland Stadium last year. He's on there, as well as Juice Wells at Ole Miss, coming over from South Carolina to Ole Miss. Dane Key, a wide receiver from Kentucky, he's on the second team, along with Cooper Mays, of course. Tate Ravledge on the offensive line. Kelvin Banks on the offensive line. Third-team quarterback is Quinn Ewers from Texas. Fourth-team quarterback is Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Those are some of the highlights on the offensive side. On the defensive side, first team, along with James Pearce on the defensive front, Walter Nolan, from now going to Ole Miss. Of course, he started his career at Texas A&M. You have Deion Walker and Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. That's the defensive line. Harold Perkins, linebacker, can move around a little bit, can come off the edge, he can play off the ball. He's there at linebacker along with Small Munden of Georgia. Malachi Starks highlights the backfield on the first team from Georgia. He's a pretty decent player. So on and so forth. So, I know most of the notoriety comes from the offensive side of the football, so that's why I spent a little bit more time on that. But those are some of the highlights from the All-SEC, 4 of them, preseason teams by Phil Steele. And, again, James Pearce, first team. Cooper Mays, second team. Omar Norman Lott, third team. Squirrel White, third team. Javonte Spraggins to the fourth team. Dylan Sampson to the fourth team. And Jackson Ross to the fourth team. Those are the volunteers recognized, and I think that's a pretty good bunch. Is there anybody that was left out? Would you have put anybody else on there? I want to hear from you, and, of course, send in those questions for the mailbag show that is coming up on tomorrow's Locked On Vols. When we come back, 2 of these players were named All-Americans preseason by Phil Steele. Who are they? And should there have been somebody else? Who else was recognized as All-Americans by Phil Steele entering the 2024 season? All that and more coming up in segment 2 as we continue on with the Monday Locked On Vols. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open for that perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you truly are looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses can get qualified candidates within 24 hours on LinkedIn. You can hire professionals like professionals on LinkedIn because over 2.5 million small businesses are currently using LinkedIn for hiring, and you should as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege, where you can post your job for free. Terms and conditions, they do apply. Welcome back into your Monday edition of Locked On Vols. I am Eric Kane. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. Shout out everydayers for making this show exactly what it is. And, of course, tomorrow I'll answer some of the questions that you guys send in at _Kaner at Locked On Vols and, of course, on the Locked On Vols YouTube channel. Okay, so we discussed the Vols that made appearances on the preseason All-SEC teams from Steele. There were 4 teams. 2 volunteers were named preseason All-Americans. One, I'm sure you can guess pretty easily, and that would be defensive end James Pearce. The other one, of the names that I mentioned, anybody want to take a crack at who the other preseason All-American is from Tennessee? Is it Squirrel White? Is it Cooper Mays, Javonte Spraggins, Dylan Sampson, Omar Norman Lott? Or is it Jackson Ross? I bet you guys thought it was going to be Jackson Ross there, the way I kind of had my tone and my inflection in my voice. It's not Jackson Ross. It is Cooper Mays, offensive lineman. And I think that's more of, hey, he's been a 4-year starter in the Southeastern Conference. He's been a 3-year starter in this offense for Josh Heupel. He's helped pave the way. He's helped, deliver some of the best offensive performances in recent history in college football under Josh Heupel. Led the nation in scoring in 2022 and points in 2022. He was snapping the football all that time. So he's a name that everybody knows, and he's a very critical piece of this offensive line for Tennessee because when he's not in the lineup, when he's out with injury, you've seen how the offense has struggled at times. We go back to 2021 where Jerome Carvin had to snap the football a little bit, and it's nothing against Jerome Carvin. He's a guard. Because Tennessee still doesn't have a true answer as a backup center and doesn't have a true answer for 2025 when Cooper's not going to be part of the roster. You had to slide guys down. You had to slide Jerome Carvin down to play center. Yeah, he can do it, but it's not going at the pace and the efficiency as that of when Cooper Mays was doing it. Same with Ollie Lane last year. Ollie Lane was your starting guard. He had to slide down and play center the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season because Cooper Mays was out with injury. Excuse me. And we saw, along with several other factors on the offensive end last year, this offense just didn't have the juice that it did as, in 2022. And a lot of that as well could be because you didn't have Hendon Hooker, and Hendon Hooker's a special player. But Cooper Mays getting recognized as a preseason All-American. Now, he was named to the second team, and I'll go over these names here in just a moment. But he was named to the second team. And yeah, okay. Just making sure I didn't have my teams mixed up. He was named to the second team. And then James Pearce, of course, was named to the first team. James Pearce, double-digit sacks in the Southeastern Conference last year. I mean, just an incredible player. Being talked about as potentially the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the number 1 defensive player in the 2025 NFL Draft. Heck, we had Max Chadwick on the show a couple of times talking about James Pearce, and he said he would probably have been the first defensive player off the board in the 2024 NFL Draft if he was eligible. So that just goes to show you all the stock and all the hype and everything surrounding James Pearce. And I think James Pearce can just only get better. He's relying on, so far in his career, he's relied on nothing but athleticism, quickness, twitch off the edge, speed. He has gotten stronger. He has put on good muscle. He's been working hard, and he's working on his finesse. And it's funny, man. Defensive linemen and offensive linemen are just 2 different specimens. Both very unique in their own ways. But what I think, and back when I was at Carson Newman and I would see the defensive lineman doing this with the defensive line coach at the time, and it always cracked me up. But I mean, it's a hand game, right? I mean, it's technique. Everything's in technique. How you approach that end man on line of scrimmage. How you're going to attack that offensive lineman. If you're on the edge, you're going to set up an inside move, dip and rip and go outside and keep it tight around the edge. Or are you going to set up on the outside move, dip and rip, go inside, maybe do a spin move? But all that is hand, like combating the hands. And it's really interesting to kind of see all that. But anyway, like James Pearce is working on that. And he's going to get better and better. And I think the sky's the limit for him. I truly do. But no shocker there that James Pearce is on the first team preseason All-American list for Steele. Who else is on that first team defensively of note. I'm not going to go through and look and read everything, but on the defensive side, along with James Pearce, got a couple of nice defensive linemen. Ashton Gilate from Louisville, really good defensive lineman. Probably mispronounced his name. Howard Cross from Notre Dame. Jay Higgins from Iowa, one of those linebackers. Harold Perkins, linebacker from LSU. Defensively, a couple of Ohio State defensive backs. You've got Deontay Lawson, linebacker, on the second team from Alabama. You've got Deion Walker from Kentucky, really good defensive player. He was on the second team All-American list. Third team defensively, the new defensive end from Texas A&M from Purdue, Nick Scorton. Walter Nolan coming over from, of course, Texas A&M, now at Ole Miss. He was named to the third team. Small Munden at linebacker of Georgia. Third team. On the fourth team, SEC representatives, Alabama's Malachi Moore at safety. I think he was the only one on the fourth team. So that's a look at the SEC players that were named All-Americans on all four teams. Now, on the offensive end, like I mentioned, Cooper Mays is the second-team center for Phil Steele. You look at the first team, much like the All-SEC teams from Phil Steele. First-team quarterback, All-American, is Carson Beck. Second team is Jalen Milroe. So Georgia and Alabama get some love. Others on the first team, Ollie Gordon, probably the best running back in the country. He gets the nod at running back from Oklahoma State. Luther Burden at wide receiver. Will Campbell, offensive tackle from LSU, again, one of the guys that Lance Herb was playing behind a season ago. On the second team from around the SEC, Trey Harris, one of the wide receivers from Ole Miss. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. Xavier Truss, a tackle from Georgia. Kelvin Banks, a tackle from Texas. On the third team, that quarterback is Dylan Gabriel, by the way, of course, going from Oklahoma to Oregon. From the SEC, you have Caden Prinkscorn, the tight end, third-team All-American from Ole Miss. Tate Rutledge, offensive lineman from Georgia. And then on the fourth team from the SEC, you have the guard Chase Bizontes from Texas A&M. I'm sure I butchered that name. And Quinn Ewers, quarterback. So all the quarterbacks from the Southeastern Conference represent Phil Steele's All-Americans. You have Carson Beck from Georgia as the first team quarterback. Jalen Milroe from Alabama is the second team quarterback. I lied. Dylan Gabriel's in there. In my mind, I was still thinking Oklahoma, but of course he's at Oregon now, so my statement is factually incorrect. I apologize. But then you have Ewers there from Texas as a fourth-team All-American. So a pretty good showing. Should anybody else from Tennessee have been named a preseason All-American? Kind of the same question that I asked about the All-SEC teams in segment 1. Anybody else should be an All-American? Of the list here, outside of Cooper Mays and James Pearce, I can't really make a case for anybody else, to be completely honest with you. So I think Phil Steele got that right. Still a good showing, though. Still a really, really good showing, and just kind of continues to create some buzz as football season nears for the University of Tennessee. Can't wait to continue to break down more lists like this throughout the offseason. But, guys, we're midway through June, man. Media Day is going to be here next month. Fall camp's going to be here 1st of August. I mean, we're about into it, guys. We don't have much longer, I can promise you that. But, hey, right now, the story of the day, the story of the week is Tennessee in the College World Series. Going to tell you about the best game in Tennessee baseball history and the best game that I've ever covered. That's going to be in segment number 3 coming up here on a Locked On Vols. Yes, I recognize Tennessee was runner-up in 1951. I recognize Tennessee won some other games in Omaha, but I think that the one on Friday night, you can really make the case that's the best game in Tennessee baseball history. Why? Coming up here on the other side as we continue on here with a Monday edition of Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. I want to say about our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Summertime means more baseball. The NBA Finals, the Mavericks just stayed alive the other night to not go down in sweeping fashion. Stanley Cup Finals as well is very one-sided right now. But while those finals are still going on, you can put some coin in your pocket over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It is America's #1 sportsbook. And, of course, baseball, like I mentioned. Baseball games are every single day. NASCAR on the weekends are so much fun. You've got golf. You've got this. You've got that. You got futures bets and futures odds. College World Series is happening right now. All that and more. You can put some coin in your pocket over at FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers right now can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 that you can bet on anything and everything from finals MVP to who's going to hit a home run coming up in the next inning. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, it is America's #1 sports book. All right, we got a final segment left here this Monday edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for being here. Again, don't forget, you've got a mailbag edition of the show that is coming up tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to answering your questions and kind of talking about whatever's on your mind. Tennessee baseball, tons of recruiting from over the weekend. Hopefully we'll get one of my colleagues to come on to the show and break down everything that happened over the weekend, where Tennessee had 26 official visitors. Goodness gracious. But your questions, that's coming up on tomorrow's show. I want to tell you about Tennessee's win in the College World Series over Florida State from Friday. Again, disclaimer, recording this before Sunday's ball game against North Carolina. That game starts at 7 Eastern, 6 local. I'm going to be over the ballpark until midnight. It's not, logistics-wise, it's not doable to be able to chat on a Monday show about that ball game. And I do apologize. I really do. Some commenters in the channel just don't quite comprehend how things work. But for the most part, you guys have been really gracious and understanding in that, so I do thank you. We will touch base on whatever Tennessee does against North Carolina and kind of set the scene for what's coming up the rest of the week and what that win or loss means and all that on Tuesday's show. But boy, Florida State, man, that is a good baseball team. That is a good baseball team. I was talking to Christian Moore, and I'll get into him in a moment because he had history on Friday. After the game, he was just like, dude, like, that team is so good. They are so good. I'm so not fortunate. They believe they can win. They know that they're good too, but it's like, you do not want to see Florida State again, like, in my opinion. Florida State is so good. But nonetheless, Tennessee is so good as well. 12-11. Tennessee overcomes a 3-run deficit in the 9th inning, scoring 4 runs, walking it off with a Dylan Dryland single. I understand they put it down as a single. I thought he touched second. I would have given it a double. But nonetheless, it's all the same. Tennessee walked it off. Tennessee Tennessee celebrated on the field, and fireworks were ensuing. I mean, what a opening game for Tennessee that hadn't won an opening game in Omaha since 1995. And you lose that opening game, boy, it's just tough, man. It is a tough hill to climb up that mountain and try to get out of that regional-like setup because you're having to play more games. And I mean, what can you say about Christian Moore? Christian Moore went 5 for 6, scored 4 runs, drove in a run, had 2 doubles, and of course had a home run. Tennessee goes down by 1 run in the top of the first inning. Okay. What's Christian Moore do? He leads off the bottom half of the first inning, the home half of the first inning, triples, and then comes in and scores on an RBI single from Blake Burke. It just doesn't bat an eye, does Tennessee, does Christian Moore. He triples in his first AB. He doubles in a run in his second AB in the second inning. He singles in the 4th inning. And then his 440-foot, 117-mile-per-hour line drive home run to center field in the 6th inning locked up only the 2nd cycle in College World Series history. Incredible. I mean, we got to go all the way back to 1956 was the only other time that a cycle has been hit in a College World Series game. Tennessee's now hit for the cycle in each of the past 3 seasons. You had Trey Lipscomb that did it in 2022. You had Zane Denton that did it in 2023, and then, of course, now SEMO has done it in the College World Series, but in 2024. Tennessee's now hit for the cycle 6 times in program history. I mean, what more can you say? I'm running out of words here to describe, how good of a season and how good of a year and how good of a player Christian Moore is. On the biggest stage, just doesn't back down. I wrote a story about this over the weekend on Saturday, just kind of continuing to look back and reflect on what happened. I don't want to go back all into the vault of Tennessee sports history, but let's just go recent history here. There's been some elite performances. Jalen Hyatt against Alabama, okay? 5 touchdowns, 6 receptions on 8 targets, 207 yards, 5 touchdowns against Alabama. What a performance. Dalton Knecht, pick your poison, right? I mean, he scored over 40 points. He scored 40 points once. He scored 39 points at least 4 times. He scored over 35 points like 7 times. I mean, pick your performance for Dalton Knecht. The volume is there for Knecht. been some pretty elite performances here, but what Christian Moore did on the stage, essentially, and what was, if you're unfamiliar with how this works in the College World Series, it's essentially the Elite Eight, okay? Hitting for the cycle, 5 hits in a game, scoring 4 runs, that's the most elite. That's an all-timer. That's the most elite performance off the top of my head in at least recent memory for Tennessee that I can even, like, come forth with. I mean, I understand there's been great football performances. There's been great baseball performances in the past. You know, Todd Helton comes to mind a couple of times. There's been great, softball performances and basketball performances, and Ernie and Bernie and, Lofton and Grant Williams. And, I mean, I get all that. But, I mean, here in recent memory, there's been some really good ones. I mean, that tops it. And, I mean, it'd be hard-pressed to find more of an elite performance in Tennessee sports history, in my opinion, than what Christian Moore did on Friday night. But, man, Tennessee came back, took the lead with 2 runs scored in the bottom of the first inning. They scored 2 more runs in the second inning, leading 4-1. And then it was the bad inning. Florida State put on 6 runs in the third inning. 6 runs to lead 7-4 midway through the third. Tennessee tacked on 2 runs in the fifth, or actually, Florida State tacked on 2 more runs in the fourth to make it 9-4. Tennessee scored 2 in the fifth, 1 in the sixth. Florida State scored 2 more in the seventh to make it 11-7 at the time. Tennessee scored a run, I believe it was a Kavor Sears home run in the eighth. Can't remember who it was. Apologize. Actually, I can look it up right now. Tennessee scores a run in the 8th inning to cut the deficit to 3 runs. Let's see, 8th inning. It was a Dylan Dreiling RBI single. Tears, that home run was in the 5th inning. And then the stage is set for Tennessee to come to the bottom of the 9th inning, and all Tennessee does is lead off with a triple, the second leadoff triple of the game. Remember, Simo did it in the first inning. Then it was Kavoris Tears that did it in the 9th inning. He comes in to score on an RBI sacrifice fly that would have been a home run in Lindsey Nelson Stadium off the bat of freshman Dean Curley. Okay, 1 out, but Tennessee's down now 11-9. Okay, tying runs in the on-deck circle. Cannon Peebles comes on as a pinch hitter for Dalton Bargo. He walks. Great walk. Cal Stark fouls out in foul territory. Very unproductive at bat. There's 2 outs, so you're kind of sweating here, right? Tying runs at the plate. You have a man on first, but you have 2 outs. But that tying run is represented by Christian Moore at the plate. The lineup card flips over. Simo doubles to left. Peebles goes to third. Simo's at second. Okay, Simo's the run that counts, so they didn't take any chances. They held up Peebles at third with 2 outs. Simo's run is the one that counts because it's the tying run. He's at second base. And with Blake Burke coming up to the plate, he singles up the middle on a 3-2 pitch. Both runners score, and that ball game was tied at 11-all. Dylan Dreiling came up later on, or batter later, and a hanging breaking ball. He elevated his swing, went up there and hit it into the gap in left center field, and Blake Burke scores, and Tennessee wins the opening ball game. Now, Blake Burke, before tying the game, it was 2-2 pitch. He had a check swing. And boy, they appealed down to third base umpire, and he said he held up, okay? And that's kind of one of those situations where it's like in a basketball game. It's like, you're going to call that foul there? Are you kidding me? And then the other side of that would be like, well, they got to be consistent. If they're going to call that a foul in the first half, you got to call it a foul in the second half with 30 seconds left. Be consistent. But it's the same argument. It's like, you mean to tell me you're going to make that call then in that game? Or you got to swallow the whistle. It's a very similar situation here. We've all seen the replays. We've all seen the breakdowns from everybody on X, and they're drawing their lines and all that. Fact of the matter is, they appealed. They said he didn't go around. You move on with your business. If you're a Florida State fan, sure, you have a gripe, in my opinion. But if I'm a Florida State fan, I'm sitting here thinking like, boy, my team was up 9-4 at one point. My team had a 3-run lead entering the 9th inning. My team blew all that before the check swing even matters. Everybody I've talked to says on an appeal like that, the umpire is not going to end a game on a check swing. You got to let the players decide how the game is going to end. And Blake Burke and Dylan Dreiling and Tennessee all decided how that game was going to end. So if you want to break it down in super, super slow motion and all that and look at it again, there's a real case that Blake Burke went around. But you know what? The umpire said he didn't, and that's all that matters. So who cares? Blake Burke took advantage of that opportunity and tied the ball game. What a game. What a phenomenal performance, a historic performance for Christian Moore and the Cardiac Vols in a game where defense was sloppy, Pitching outside of Nate Snead was really bad, and give Florida State their flowers. That is a good baseball team, and they had a lot to do with why Tennessee's pitching, for the most part, outside of Nate Snead, was really, really bad. Nate Snead's a good ball player, but Florida State is good. But on a night where Tennessee's pitching was not good, Tennessee's defense was not good, Tennessee's base running at points and times was not good, Tennessee couldn't even beat itself. What a win. The most important win in Tennessee baseball history, in my opinion, for sure in recent history, because it puts you on this trajectory. You're sitting really, really well, continuing on in the College World Series. We'll talk all about Tennessee and North Carolina from Sunday night on tomorrow's show. We'll answer your questions. We'll talk Tennessee recruiting, all that and more. That is coming up on your mailbag edition of the show at _Caner at Locked On Vols on your Tuesday Locked On Vols. Can't thank you enough, guys, for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe to us, download us, all that for free on the Locked On Vols YouTube channel. Please subscribe or wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you guys for making us a part of your morning routine. Until tomorrow, enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody.